Open on cold, quiet early morning street. Slow zoom. Wind sound. No music yet. Silence builds tension. She had $8 left in her wallet. Not 800, not $888. That was everything Princess Pacquiao had to her name. That cold Tuesday morning in the small town of San Isidro. She hadn't eaten since the day before. The landlord's eviction notice was still taped to her door. Her mother's medicine was almost gone. Her phone was about to die. And yet, when she saw the old man collapsed on the sidewalk, outside the convenience store, shoes worn through to bare feet, one plastic bag clutched in a trembling hand, she didn't look away. She didn't walk faster. She didn't tell herself it wasn't her problem. She stopped. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the only bill she had left, and placed it gently into his shaking hand. "Get something warm," she said quietly. "It's going to be a cold night." The old man looked up, eyes red, face hollow. He said nothing. What Princess didn't know, what no one in that town knew, was that this single moment was being watched. And by the very next morning, 100 motorcycles would roll into San Isidro, in a convoy that shook the windows of every building on the main road. Every single one of them had come for her. Stay with us, because what happens next will change the way you think about kindness forever. Soft, warm visuals, neighborhood streets, small home market scenes, gentle background score. To understand why this story matters, you need to understand who Princess Pacquiao really is. She is not famous, not powerful, not connected to anyone who could change her situation. She is a 27-year-old woman who grew up 3 blocks from that same convenience store. Her father left when she was 9. Her mother raised her and 2 younger brothers on laundry work and odd jobs. Princess quit school at 16, not because she wanted to, but because someone had to work, and she was the oldest. For 11 years she cleaned offices, sorted produce at the market, and took every shift no one else wanted. Early mornings, late nights, holidays. She never complained once. Everyone who knew her said the same thing without hesitation. That girl would give you her last rice if you were hungry. They were right. But the past 6 months had been quietly breaking her. Her cleaning job disappeared when the building was sold. Her mother's arthritis got worse. Every peso she had saved over years vanished into hospital bills. Then her brother lost his job. Then the landlord raised the rent. She told no one how bad it had gotten. Not her neighbors. Not her friends. Pride, stubbornness, and a belief, quiet and unshakable, that complaining never helped anyone. So she stayed invisible. And she kept drowning in silence. Which is exactly what makes what she did next so extraordinary. His name was Ernesto, 71 years old. Former carpenter. Widower. To anyone passing that sidewalk, he looked homeless, dirty jacket, cracked shoes, one worn plastic bag with nothing worth keeping inside. But Ernesto was not homeless. He was lost in a deeper, more painful way. 3 weeks earlier, his only daughter had stopped answering his calls. His son-in-law had locked him out of the family home. After a bitter argument over land, Ernesto had no other family in San Isidro. He had been sleeping in his old workshop ever since. No running water, barely a roof, eating whatever he could find. That night outside the convenience store, his legs simply gave out beneath him. He wasn't begging. He wasn't performing. He was just a tired old man who had completely run out of road. Here is something most of us know but rarely say out loud. Pride can be just as isolating as poverty. Ernesto had people in this world who could have helped him, but asking felt impossible, so he suffered quietly, just like Princess. 2 strangers, same cold street, same invisible weight. When Princess placed that 80 tide in his hand, he didn't spend it on food. He walked 2 blocks to the small chapel at the end of the street, sat in the very last pew, and cried for a full hour, not from sadness, from the shock of being seen. Because that is what true kindness does. It doesn't just meet a need, it reminds a person you still matter. Someone sees you. Ernesto had one contact on his cracked old phone he hadn't called in 4 years. Dante, national president of the Brotherhood Riders. Thousands of members. Chapters in every province. Decades ago, Dante had been a young man with nothing. Ernesto had let him sleep on his workshop floor for 2 weeks. Fixed his bike for free. Never asked for anything in return. Dante had never forgotten. That night, Ernesto finally made the call. Princess went home that night not knowing any of this. She counted what was left in her wallet, nothing, and opened the refrigerator out of habit. Half a pack of instant noodles. Leftover rice from 2 days ago. She made the noodles for her mother, said she had already eaten. She hadn't. She sat on the edge of her bed and did something she hadn't done in months. She prayed. Not for money. Not even for herself. She prayed for the old man on the sidewalk. That he had found somewhere warm. That the night would be gentle to him. She turned her phone off to save the last 4% of battery. And she fell asleep. There is something quietly heroic about people like Princess that the world almost never stops to acknowledge. People who are themselves in crisis, stomach empty, future uncertain, and still find a way to look outward. Still ask, is someone else hurting more than me right now? Most of us under that pressure turn inward. Survival takes over, and no one would blame us. But every so often someone chooses differently, not because they have more, but because they are more. While she slept, the world was quietly rearranging itself around her. Dante was already making calls. Chapter leaders across 5 provinces answered. Every rider asked one question, "Are you in?" Every single answer was yes. By midnight, a convoy was organized. By 2 a.m., bikes were fueled in the dark. By 4 a.m., 100 motorcycles were moving through empty highways, headlights cutting through morning fog. No cameras, no press, no audience planned. They came because an old man made one phone call and said, "A young woman gave everything she had to a stranger, and she deserves to know that kindness does not go unseen." Princess was still asleep, but not for much longer. Her neighbor knocked at 60:47 in the morning. Princess, wake up. You need to come outside right now." She opened the door still in her house of clothes, hair undone, eyes half closed. The sound hit her first, that deep, rolling thunder of engines, but somehow restrained, gentle. Like they were deliberately idling out of respect for the sleeping street. She stepped outside, barefoot on the concrete, and she saw them. 100 motorcycles, parked in 2 perfect rows stretching the entire length of her street. Riders standing beside their bikes with helmets in hand, faces turned quietly in her direction. Neighbors gathered on both sides of the road, some still in pajamas, some holding coffee they had forgotten to drink. Children had climbed on walls to see. An elderly woman across the street was already pressing a handkerchief to her face. Princess stood there and did not move. She looked at her neighbor. "What is this?" Before anyone could answer, Ernesto stepped forward from the crowd. She recognized him immediately, the old man from last night. But he stood differently now, taller, steadier. Like something that had been taken from him had been quietly returned. "You helped me last night," he said. "You gave me everything you had. I just wanted you to know what you did was seen." Then Dante stepped forward, broad-shouldered, calm, tattoos at his collar, patches on his vest. The kind of man whose presence makes a crowd go still without him asking. "We don't know you, Miss Princess," he said simply. "But we know what you did. And in this world, that matters." He held out an envelope. This is the moment that undoes people, not the grand speeches or the big gestures, but the specific, unbearable tenderness of being truly recognized. Of someone saying, "We saw you. You are not invisible. You matter enough that we drove through the night for you." For someone who had been carrying everything alone for 6 months and told no one, this was the kind of relief that only hits hard, because you had quietly stopped expecting it. "I didn't do anything special," Princess whispered. "I just didn't want him to be cold." That was the moment the crowd broke completely. Her mother appeared in the doorway behind her. One hand over her mouth, Princess finally took the envelope. Inside, enough to cover 6 months of rent and her mother's medicine for a full year. But Dante still wasn't finished. What he said next, no one standing on that street was ready for it. Dante turned to face the crowd. "This woman," he said, "lost her job 6 months ago. She has been completely silent about it, because she is not the kind of person who asks for help." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a formal job offer. Full-time, fair wage, full benefits for her and her mother, from a logistics company owned by 3 Brotherhood members who had made a call on the drive down before they even arrived. "We don't just show up and leave," he said. "We show up and stay." The street erupted, not in chaos, but in that unmistakable sound of an entire community exhaling together, clapping, someone laughing. The bakery owner across the road disappeared inside and came back with 2 full trays of bread, handing them out freely to strangers she had never spoken to before. That afternoon, a journalist passing through San Isidro posted her phone footage online without much thought. By evening, 40,000 shares. By the next morning, 300,000. By week's end, millions of views from countries Princess couldn't find on a map. Comments flooded in from strangers around the world. People writing, "I needed this today." People writing, "I'm going to go do something kind right now because of this." And then, quietly, something else happened. Ernesto's daughter saw the video, recognized the worn jacket, the plastic bag. She called him that same night. They talked for 2 hours. She was coming on Saturday. 2 days later, Princess and Ernesto sat together on her front steps as the street returned to normal around them. Sometimes, Ernesto said quietly, a small good thing fixes more than you can ever see. Princess accepted the job. Ernesto moved into a small apartment 3 streets away. The first 3 months quietly funded by the neighbors of San Isidro. On his wall, framed in simple wood, he hung one photograph from that morning. Princess barefoot on her street, surrounded by 100 motorcycles and an entire town bearing witness. Beneath it, in small letters, he wrote himself, "This is what 8 looks like when it is given with a full heart." Here is what this story teaches us. Kindness is not measured in amount. It is measured in cost. Giving 8 of when you have 8 is not a small gesture. It is everything. And everything, offered from the right place, travels further than you will ever be able to track. Princess did not give to be rewarded. She gave because she saw a human being sitting in the cold and decided, even in her own pain, that his suffering deserved to be answered. That decision cost her everything she had left, and it came back as more than she ever could have planned for. There are thousands of people like Princess in this world right now, carrying impossible weight in silence, and still choosing to reach outward. Most of them will never go viral. Most of them will never see a convoy, but they give anyway, because that is simply who they are. The real question this story asks is not whether kindness gets rewarded. It is, what kind of person do you choose to be when no one is watching, and you have almost nothing left? Princess answered that on a cold Tuesday morning. With aid, and no hesitation, more stories like this one are coming, stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things in the quietest ways. Before you go, which part of this story stayed with you the most? The moment she gave her last 8, the convoy arriving, Ernesto's daughter finally calling, or the 7 words on his wall? Drop it in the comments. We read every single one, and your answers shape the stories we bring you next. Like if you believe kindness should always find its way back. Share this with someone who needs a reminder today that the world is still good. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. More good stories are on the way.